Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final day of our webinar series on setting up a company in China. You've joined us for day 5, part 5 of this webinar series, where we are going to be looking at the in-depth look about your registered office address in China. Now, as I've mentioned throughout this week, this is really one of the biggest stumbling blocks for companies in China, where they end up paying a certain price in relation to issues that surround them when dealing with registered office address. So it is day 5. I'm not going to be asking people, because we don't have any guest speakers, about whether you're a newbie or a startup or an experienced China hand. We're going to leave out this slide and swiftly move on to just the technical aspects associated with how the webinar works. From a technical point of view, we are using Zoom. We have had so far no issues with the system this week, but I do just want to highlight that if you do run into any technical issues, please do log off the system and log back into the system. This will certainly help you. We are recording today's session, so if you are logging in, logging out a multiple of times, don't get yourselves frustrated. Just look at the recording later on when it's up on our YouTube channel. If any issues arise on my side, it happened a little bit yesterday where I was booted off my Wi-Fi, but it just took a few seconds for me to get back into the system. Just know, again, my Wi-Fi has to reboot. Will take a bit of time, and I will log off, log back in again as well. The whole point of this webinar today is to look really in depth at one key consideration that has to happen around China, which is your registered office address location. Use this time wisely, ask questions, make comments. You have the chat function because we are using Zoom meetings, so ask all of your questions in that area. I will be staying on until all the questions have been answered or all the comments have been answered. All right, I'm still admitting people into the room. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I'm one of the leading experts on inbound investment into the Chinese market. Let me put it another way, 100% of my clients are foreign investors that are looking to invest in the Chinese market by establishing entities and running those entities. Our specialty at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is purely on the administrative functions surrounding your business models in China. So whether that's offering services around employer of record or the actual incorporation of an entity, or all of the ongoing administrative functions around corporate services, that is what we do on a day-to-day basis. I've helped over 500 companies with their investment advisory, how they should be structuring their business, whether they need an entity or not in the Chinese market, and then implementing those structures and adapting those structures as their journey begins in the Chinese market. And something that I enjoy tremendously is growth in the Chinese market. It's something that I enjoy advising clients on, particularly from a financial point of view. So that's something that we do as well. I'm a creator of the China Roadmap methodology, as well as the China Incorporation Blueprint. If you had the chance to see Monday's session, that is the China Incorporation Blueprint, all about what you need to know in terms of setting up a company. And I'm also a creator of the China Profit Accelerator, which is looking in depth at a financial point of view in relation to your Chinese business and your Chinese company. All right, I will add my contact details into the chat section later on during the Q&A, but just know that more than happy to have a conversation with you guys if you have any questions or you want to have a one-to-one discussion. All right. So to start off today's presentation, what are we covering? We're going to cover the importance of getting a real estate agent. I'm not a real estate agent, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm a real estate agent. You need a real estate agent to find an appropriate location for you. And I'd be more than happy to give you guys tips on what to look at, specific to Shanghai, because that's what I know in detail compared to other cities. But you need a real estate agent. You need to do a location analysis. Now, I've been talking to a couple of companies this week who, on one hand, say they want to be in one location, and on the other hand, say maybe another city would be better. You need to decide that up front. Okay, you can't change your mind in the process, and I'll explain why as we talk about the legal and tax consequences around your registered office address. Okay, and then I'll be providing you with action plans just on this one key consideration. So if you join Monday's session, there are 9 key considerations that you have to make going into the Chinese market. Your registered office address is just one, and I'm doing one presentation on that topic. That's just to show you how much consideration and decisions you have to make around one of these points to make sure that you are going in the right direction in China. What I want people to avoid is paying me to fix things. Okay, and that happens more often than I would like. So the goal for today's session is making sure that you only pay a service provider for the incorporation, because you know that that is a solid incorporation where all the details behind that are there, so that no changes have to be made further along, because you will be spending more on fixing things than doing it right from the beginning. Okay, so setting up a company in China. One of the documents that you will need to provide to your service provider, lawyer, incorporation agent, whomever, is a lease agreement for a registered office address. Okay, that is the address that in theory is your operational office. It is where government officers will go, because it is what is written on your business license. You cannot provide secondary offices or anything like that, okay? One office is supposed to be where you are, okay? That's the whole concept behind it. So tip 1 is partner with a real estate agent in China, okay? They will have the guidelines around what would be the best location for you. If you are planning on setting up a factory, then you need to find a warehouse or factory space. If you are setting up a trading company or service company, you potentially only need a commercial space. What type of commercial space would fit your industry, right? Look at the style of your operation. Is it better to be in a co-working environment which is a bit more brand related, or is it better to have your own space? In China, buildings are defined by grades. Grade A means that it's a very high-end commercial space. Grade C, grade D, you're looking at very old buildings, some of which may have been converted into nice upgraded commercial style buildings, but still they're considered grade C, grade D. So when you are doing an analysis of where you want to be in China, obviously you've got to find out first in which province do you want to be in which city do you want to be in which district do you want to be in. That's how far you have to go in your decision-making process. Okay, and again, there are tax and legal consequences around that line of deciding province, city, district, all right? And then obviously when you're looking at the buildings, look at your style of operation, look at the demographics around, look at the foot traffic, especially if you're in retail. But even if you're gonna have an operational office and you're hiring people, is there parking? Is there the metro? Is there buses? What is the accessibility like? Is your competitor around the corner? Maybe you then want to be somewhere else. When I first moved to Shanghai, I started off in business centers. So I was in one business center first, moved to a second business center, and then I went into my own office space. And my main decision-making process then was related to cost versus looking at foot traffic, which I didn't necessarily need, but what I did need was access to public transportation, which wasn't there yet. And there were 0 restaurants in the neighborhood, 0. I was going to the Kuaidi, which is the 7-Eleven, to get my lunches because there were no restaurants in the area yet. It took about 3 to 4 years for that area to develop. And eventually there was a metro that was 2 minutes away and all of that. But for the first 5 years, it was pretty tough on the staff and myself, just in terms of the infrastructure that was surrounding the building. So you can be in the CBD locations and have all of that there. You're going to pay a higher rent, obviously. And now in places like Shanghai, you have a multiple of CBD areas. You have one in Pudong, you have one in Huangpu, and then you have one out at the Hongqiao airport. So, you know, it depends on where you're going to be, where your staff from, etc. Look at the image and history of the site. You know, look at also the regulations in that district or in that zone or in that industrial park. What are they offering you as incentives? Look at the infrastructure of the building. Is there water availability? What do the toilets look like? And obviously all of this is really tricky right now, which is because you can't go to China and observe all of this. So either if you already have someone on hand, i.e. a freelance employee or somebody on board already, have them do that search for you and take photos and do that review, or even, you know, do WeChat calls to view those sites. Or again, work with a real estate agent who is going to take you around and do those virtual tours for you. It is important to show that image. So for a company like myself that is in the service sector, image is of vital importance, which is why we ended up starting off in a business center. And now we are in the center of town. We're near, if anybody knows Shanghai, we're near Xintiandi, which is a social hub. We're on Huahailu, which is two of the main roads on Puxi. And we're in a building called K11 that, again, has a certain image level to it. So analyze that to know what you want to also portray in regards to your company. And doing a location analysis is critical. Real estate agents do that for you. They can do that form of advisory in terms of what would be the best location for your business. Because what you want to do in a location analysis is not only what's vital today, but also what's going to be vital in 5 to 10 years in terms of the needs you need in relation to office space or your co-working space or whatever it might be, okay? People grow in China, companies grow in China. So you need to have also a strategic plan on how you're going to be growing and increasing your office space. So please remember, real estate agents offer this type of analysis and advisory for you. And I really recommend it. All right, I just wanted to show a picture to you because this is Starbucks flagship store in Shanghai. I call it a store because it is actually a place where they roast the beans. If you guys have never been there, it is just a beautiful touristic site as well. It used to be the former opera house. It is beautiful. The entire building is purely Starbucks and it is gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And they have named it its flagship store for China because that is the image they want to portray in the Chinese market, okay? And I don't even want to know what type of rent they're paying for that property and that facility, but it is, there was a lot of strategic decision made behind that location. If you guys get to go to China, get to cross borders and enter Shanghai, grab yourselves a cup of coffee there. It is wonderful. So please do your research on the right location. Again, I'm not a real estate agent. This is not my expertise. Get help in that regard. Step 2 is partner with a local market entry advisor, lawyer, incorporation agent, but get advice so you know upfront what are the legal and tax consequences surrounding the location and what happens if you don't abide by the rules and regulations. So this is the in-depth analysis that I'm going to make today, because this is what I offer in terms of services, in terms of the legal consequences of selecting your location in China. The next step is I will look at the tax consequences of selecting your location in China. So when you are registering your company in China, a registered office address is a must for any type of company registration, whether you're setting up a factory, warehouse, trading company, service company, representative office, joint venture, whatever it might be, you need to have a registered office address. Your business license will state what that registered office address is. That registered office address will be in all government systems, all the way from the Ministry of Commerce to the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, to the bank, to the tax bureau. Everybody will know that address. Hence, it must be your operational office as well. Now, are virtual offices allowed? By law, virtual office addresses are illegal in China. What does that mean? It means that a registered office address that is going to be stated on your business license is a room with 4 walls, okay? You need room number, you need the address. It is a room with 4 walls, okay? Now, business centers, many of them, offer the solution of what I call the registered office address only solution, which is where a business center has multiple amount of offices, i.e. rooms with 4 walls, whereby it could very well be that a company is not registered with the real estate bureau in that room, and hence they are offering it to companies that just want to have the address of it, but not operationally use it initially. And that office is then actually used by another company that hasn't registered it anywhere. They're just using it as a real type of office location with no company registered at all in there, okay? Or it could be an individual that is just renting that space to rent that space. So there is this loophole that I want to mention. So when I actually incorporated my company, I used a registered office address only solution to cut my cost. But the minute that I had my business license issued and the bank account open, I upgraded it to an actual space. Then I then changed my registered office address to that location. For me, that's not a problem. I don't charge myself for that type of corporate service. For you, if you take that solution, be wary that your corporate service provider will ask you to pay for those changes, okay? Now, what is the issue in relation to virtual office addresses? There are 2 issues, and I know a lot of law firms are offering this, which makes me very upset, and I tell you why. It's because law firms do not proactively tell you when they have to renew your contracts. And that gets to me, I get very upset, okay? So you approach a law firm, the law firm says, I'll incorporate your company. And by the way, I have a virtual office concept, you can use it, but giving no advisory to you on the pros and cons to that, okay? That upsets me because then they also don't mind you when that contract has to be renewed. So what happened to a client of mine? They incorporated with a law firm. They never actually even signed a contract, or according to my client, he doesn't remember signing that lease agreement. And as a consequence, because there was no rent booked in the books, in the accounts, and because there was no valid lease agreement, their bank, which was a merchants bank in Shanghai, froze their accounts. It was frozen for a period of 3 months, meaning that for 3 months, because it does take between 6 to 12 weeks to get the change done, right? No, not to mention, my client had to negotiate a new lease. We had to go through the process of updating the business license, which alone takes 6 weeks. It took 3 months until the bank accounts were unfrozen, which means 3 months, employees couldn't get paid. No expenses could be settled. Clients could continue to pay into the account, but there was no way for you to utilize the accounts to pay for anything, whether it was using the online banking system or going in person. Okay, this is why I get frustrated, guys. This is why this is damaging to your business. How can you focus on the growth of your organization? You don't pay attention to these little things, and because you are sparing bucks and taking routes like this and not being proactive and updating your lease agreements and whatnot, things like bank accounts get frozen. Or in another scenario, you get random government inspections. So, and nobody can control that. That's random. It's basically a lottery. You're picked out of the hat and somebody comes and visits you. And if you then use a virtual office address and actually your operation is somewhere else, the government is going to go to the location that is written on your business license. Okay. Now, what happened there? The Ministry of Commerce did a random inspection to our client. In the end of the day, They got a fine and a penalty for not being in the district. And they were given a time frame in which they were asked to relocate their registered office address. So it was penalty, time frame to do the change, and there was a third thing that had to happen, which was in your record. So basically, when you set up your company in China, in the Ministry of Commerce system, anytime that there is a situation like that, it is recorded. It is not a matter of good standing if you've got a remark saying, they didn't follow the system or the rules and regulations. If you're planning eventually to acquire investors or to sell your company, you don't want any of these comments put into your record, right? A clean record. You want to show that you're doing things correctly, okay? So again, I do get frustrated because I don't want to fix people's messes. I want people to focus on what is critical to their business, which is growth. I don't want you to have staff turnover because your bank accounts are frozen and you can't pay people's salaries. You think they're going to stay with you for 3 months if they don't get paid? Of course not. All right. And there's no way for you to remit money. You can't pay from your shareholder to their bank accounts. Every single individual in China has a certain amount of threshold or limit about the exchange that can occur in their personal accounts. Does not look good. All right. So this is why I'm adamant. I'm going to go back to the previous slide. Registered office address is a must. Please make sure it is your operational office. Okay. There are so many solutions around there, and I'm going to be highlighting some of them where you can cut costs, but be reasonable with all of this. A 1-year lease agreement must be signed. Any agreement that is shorter than this will be denied during the registration process. So to no fault of this client, I have an American client who signed the lease agreement with a business center, and everything was going A-okay. We even submitted the online declaration had been done. We actually submitted the original applications to the Ministry of Commerce for the final steps of approval. And the day that we submitted, we got a phone call from them saying, please retract the application. Trump has announced that if we have any association with a company in China, we won't get COVID subsidies. So that halted their business. Now that Trump is out, Biden is in, that law is revoked in the US, and they can now proceed with their incorporation. But as a consequence, their current lease agreement is not valid. So they've had to renew it in order to make sure there's a 12-month lease on their contract. If it's 6 months or less, you will have to renew it in order to make sure that it is actual 12 months on it. Another legal consequence is that the type of property has to match the business scope that you are specifying in the incorporation. So if you are specifying that you are going to be doing manufacturing or trading, in this case, you have to be either, if it's trading, you can be in a commercial space or you can be in a warehouse factory space. If you are doing production, you can only be in a factory or warehouse space. You can't be in a commercial space. If you're stating that you're going to do retail, you have to have a retail shop, right? That is matching, okay? If you're doing retail in the future, then only add retail and update your business scope later on, okay? Because you don't want to pay for a lease of a retail shop that you're never going to use until 1 or 2 years down the road. So remember that with all of this content, it can be updated based on your phased business plan, but we want to make sure that things are right from the beginning. So things have to match. It has to all make sense. If you are submitting a lease agreement that says it is a commercial space, but actually you're doing production, the government's going to be like, what are you doing? It makes 0 sense, right? And how they're going to find that out is not just through the lease agreement, but you also have to provide from the real estate bureau the ownership certificate of the property, and on that ownership certificate it states what type of property it is, whether it's commercial, residential, retail, or factory warehouse. Note that in all of this, I have not mentioned anything about having a residential space because you cannot set up companies in residential properties. All right, be accepted. Guys, if you have any questions on this, please do let me know. Another legal consequence. So I know that in some jurisdictions, and again, I only know Hong Kong and China, so I'm going to use Hong Kong as an example. In Hong Kong, we have almost 95% of our clients in Hong Kong registered at our office address. You can have 1,000, 100,000 companies in Hong Kong registered at one registered office address. All right. That's just how the system works. In China, it does not work like that. One company can be registered in one office space. I cannot house people, which is why the virtual office address concept is illegal. All right. It is because that only one company can be registered in one office space. So this means that if you want to be in your partner space, right? What happens in those areas, or what we recommend, is that that space is then split into two offices. Walls have to be built, doors have to be created, where you have, I don't know, you're on the 14th floor and you have room 1, then you have room 1A, 1B. And the landlord has to update their ownership certificate that they have split that space into two physical offices so that two companies can be registered, one in each space. All right. You have to be wary of all of this. Only one company can be registered in one office space. All right. Now, this also leads into difficulties when you're looking to upgrade your representative office to your limited liability company. If you have started off with a rep office in China and you want to upgrade, your rep office has the registration for that office space. Where's your limited liability company going to be? You want to maintain that office space, you have to move the rep office out to a new location, change that registered office address application, move that limited liability company into there. You can't close down the rep office until the limited is set up, because you got to make sure the employees are still employed by a proper entity and the assets are owned by a proper entity. And once the limited company is set up, you can transfer the assets to employees and then liquidate. It gets to be a pain. So like I said, making a key decision on the type of entity you need, as well as your location, is critical, because you don't want to deal with these additional costs later on. Conversion of entities is not possible in China. All right, it's basically liquidating, setting up new. Another legal consequence is suddenly realizing that the location you have chosen is not a success for your China business and you want to change cities. So I'm going to use simple examples here, guys. Let's say you decide today I'm registering in Shanghai. It's the right location. And in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, you're saying, oh, Christina, you know what? We made a terrible decision. Shanghai is not the right place. We now want to be in Beijing. Okay. Now, you can't just move your company from Shanghai to Beijing if that's not possible. You have established under the Shanghai Ministry of Commerce, and they hold that application for your business. You can't just move it. So there are two options that you can have. One is, which is the simplest, is to say, I'll maintain my Shanghai company and I'll open up a branch in Beijing. What this means, though, is that you are then operating two companies versus just one, or paying for two rents versus just one. And potentially, I don't know if you're going to have to keep an employee there or not, right? So it's literally operating two entities. Otherwise, you are liquidating your Shanghai company at the same time as you are creating your Beijing company. That's how it goes. So this is also another reason why I say choosing the location is critical. And having a real estate agent offer that service of doing a location analysis is just an advantage to you, that you have concrete data about where you should be located. If your plan is expansion and you have Shanghai, then Beijing, then Chengdu, then Shenzhen, fine, that's no problem, that's expansion. But if the goal is that you just want to have one office to minimize cost and be in one location for operational purposes, think wisely about where you want to be. All right. So if you guys have questions regarding the legal consequences, then okay, there's two questions that popped in, one from Julia and one from, I'm trying to scroll up, and one from Chuka. So I'll touch on those because they will be associated, I assume, to what I've just said about the legal consequences. So Chuka's was, can you have a registered office and correspondence office differently? Well, for me, Chuka, that just means you're going to have a registered office address, and I don't know what you mean by correspondence. Mail gets sent to your registered office address. So what I mean by registered office address is that is what the government knows. That's where mail is going to go. That's where government inspectors are going to go. That's where all of the contact is going to be with that office address that's in your business license. If you are referring now to an operational office where people are going to be based, that needs to be the same address. All right. I had a situation, funnily enough, where, and then you have to be very strategic as well about certain things. I had a client in Shenzhen who had an operational office, which was his registered office address, but all of his staff were on site one day, and it happened to be the day that a government officer inspected. And because nobody was in that office, they actually padlocked it. And nobody could open the office until they went to the government Ministry of Commerce to say, hey, why did you lock it? All our staff were on site. You could see the computer in the office. Why did you padlock it? And the government's spiel or answer was actually, you should have always somebody located in that office as well, which is why I always say, evaluate business centers, guys, because you automatically get a receptionist in that, okay? So think very carefully on that point. Chuka, I hope I answered your question. Registered office address is your correspondence address. That's where the mailing is going to be going. Julia's question was, would an office space room rented from a commercial service building be accepted as address for company registration? So Julia, an office space room rented from a commercial service building. I don't know what a commercial service building is. Do you just mean a commercial building?
Well, basically, let me just, sorry, Christina, let me just clarify, because we actually spoke to some of the real estate agents. They recommended some, commercially service provider buildings, they actually just provide office space, you rent it off them. And yep. Which means in that particular building, for example, in the New World building in Shanghai, you got a lot of offices. Yep. So I just wanted to double check that is allowed, because I'm a bit concerned just now when you said, certainly you cannot give out your company address to other company to register. But if we share the same kind of big office space, but have different rooms, would that be allowed?
Well, that's a business center.
Yeah.
So a business center is possible as long as you are leasing the room. And that room is then registered with your company name at the real estate bureau. So, okay. I mean, you have business centers like the Executive Center, Regis, CEO Suite, the Apollo Building. You have Australia House, which I will highlight later on. You have all of these different business centers. It's not a building, it's a business center. So they have, for example, the whole floor, and it's separated into small office spaces.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Sorry,
okay, business centers are absolutely feasible. No problem there. No issue whatsoever.
Okay. Thank you.
But again, hopefully you're going to have staff in there as well, right? Now the reason why I recommend business centers is predominantly because you have a receptionist. So if you are starting off with just one or two people, and they're going to be traveling or moving around and not particularly on site, the advantage is you have this receptionist who can answer on the government, on your company's behalf to whomever is coming to the reception desk, right? And that avoids things like your office being padlocked and whatnot, okay? So,
thank you.
So Chuka, Julia, I answered your questions on that. So I'm going to start off now with the tax consequences, which again, people don't also always realize. And I've got pictures so that I can explain it properly to you. But I'm going to use the example of Shanghai when I'm talking about tax consequences. It will apply to every single city, whether we're talking about Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Beijing, Shanghai, Wuxi, Nanjing, Suzhou, wherever, when we're talking about a city, all right? Each city in China is made up of districts. When you choose an office space, remember, you are registering your company in that city and you are registering your tax status within that district in the city. So to give you an understanding, this is Shanghai, all right? It's a very concise picture of Shanghai, guys, in order for you to really understand what I'm trying to what I'm trying to show as the concept. If you see the yellow area, that's Shanghai Central. That's made up of 8 districts in itself. And then you've got Pudong New District, Fengshan, Minhang, Songjiang, Jinshan, Chingpu, Jiading, Baoshan, all right? Those are then the outside cities of, outside districts, but all within Shanghai. The yellow areas are in theory really, when you say it's Shanghai Central, it really is, all of those areas are CBDs in themselves. Okay, that's kind of how Shanghai is formulated. So my company, Woodburn, is registered in Shanghai. Our office is located in Huangpu District, which is point number 1 on the map. And my tax bureau is the Huangpu District Tax Bureau. If you were to register in Jiading, you are registering your company in Shanghai, and your tax registration is with the Jiading District Tax Bureau. If you are registering in Pudong, you are registering your company in Shanghai, your district tax bureau is Pudong. So every single number in Shanghai Central has its own tax bureau, and then the bigger districts have their own tax bureaus. And I've highlighted this in the accounting and tax webinars that I've done. In Shanghai, as well as in any other city, there is an internal competition between the tax bureaus. So, and the competition is how much tax revenue can each district earn? Okay. So obviously, most companies are registered in the yellow area, all right, because they want to be in Shanghai Central. And I say this mostly, most foreign invested companies are in that yellow area. Jing'an is the winner, generally speaking, because that is where most of the foreign invested companies are located. And hence, their taxes are paid with the Jing'an District Tax Bureau. Now, this leads into issues later on, which I want to highlight because of this. I have this map up front. If you are thrilled with Shanghai and you say Shanghai is going to be where the company is registered forever, okay, first of all, fantastic. Point number 2, if you say, oh, Christina, we started off in Huangpu District, that's point number 1, and now to lower cost, I think I'm going to go out to Fengshan, and I found a fantastic location there. I'm going to have double the amount of space for paying the same amount of rent. Fantastic. But realize that if you're going to do just this local move, you are going to have to do a tax closure audit in Huangpu District, and then a new application to open up your tax status in Fengshan. That whole process can take up to 3 months, where if your tax bureau in Huangpu is a bit of a pain, they won't allow you to issue VAT invoices. Hence, you won't be able to issue invoices to your customers in China. That means a halt in your business potentially of 3 months. So I bet you guys are like, what? I was when I learned this 15 years ago. It is a mess. And I want you guys all to be pre-warned about this, okay? Because the Huangpu District Tax Bureau does not want to lose you as a client, especially if you're earning high revenue levels, all right? The Fengshan Tax Bureau is gonna be like, fantastic, come, we welcome you, right? As soon as you have done your closure with Huangpu, we will set you up and all that. But you have to do the tax closure audit, then there are negotiations, then Huangpu will say, oh, you have a certain amount of tax liability, please settle that. And you are under pressure to move because you want to be able to issue VAT invoices and all of these types of things, right? And the Huangpu Tax Bureau is kind of keeping you on as much as possible so they can continue to earn tax revenue from you. It gets very complicated. So this is why I highlight, when you have chosen your city, Shanghai is an example, and you're doing your location analysis, analyze the district. Is this a district that you can foresee yourself growing in? Are there office availabilities to expand and grow if needed? Because then you don't have to do any tax closure audit. You're basically choosing, moving from one office location in Huangpu to another office location in Huangpu. There's nothing to do with taxes there. You're just literally doing an office move. The minute you cross district borders, you are going to run into difficulties. All right. So be aware of that. Okay. Be aware of what that consequence could mean for your business. And again, preparation is key. If you can do that analysis work up front, I recommend you to do that analysis work up front. Another aspect regarding tax consequences is in relation to tax incentives that may be offered by state, local, or district governments. And there are a variety of different things that can be offered. Now, first of all, when any form of incentive is being offered, please get it in writing and get it chopped by either the state government, local government, or district government. Do not go by verbal agreement. In addition, when you are looking at tax incentives, understand the term of that incentive. How long is it going to last for? Because again, tax incentives are only advantageous once you are profitable. When you are starting up in your business in China, you might not be profitable from day one. When will you be profitable? That requires tax planning. All right. And once you are profitable, will that tax incentive still be valid? Will it still be operational? Right? SMEs in China right now are getting a tax incentive in all of China that if they earn a net profit, I'm going to use they use a different term. I'm just going to make it simple for you. If they use a net profit of 1 million renminbi, you get taxed at 5%. If it's between 1 and 3 million renminbi, you get taxed for the first million at 5% and the next 2 million at 10%. Once you hit a net profit of over 3 million, you're going to be taxed at 25%. This term, the term of this incentive is only until December this year. It's for 3 years. It started in 2019 and it's only valid until December 2021. Whether it will be renewed, whether it will be continued, I cannot tell you right now. All right, there's been no announcement made or anything like that. So when you are negotiating these tax incentives, whether it's in industrial zones, again, state-related incentives, local city-related incentives, or even district incentives, make sure they're valid. Make sure you know when they will be valid for. Make sure you understand the criteria to apply for them. Because the worst is also creating budget around your China business based on these incentives. And then when you do the application, you don't fulfill the criteria. Okay, so make sure that you are aware of that. Now, I hope you guys can see it's a little bit small. I apologize for that, but I wanted to give you guys an example of this. Now, you have to look again at the image and all aspects around your company, but this is a very unique example that I only know in Shanghai. I have not heard of this anywhere else in China so far. So in Shanghai, there is a building called the Australia House, which was subsidized by the Australian government, and the Australian Chamber of Commerce is housed on the 6th floor of the building. The rest of the building is managed by a property development company called the Ankin Group. And What is unique about this building is that it is a co-working, the whole building is, besides the 6th and 7th floor, is considered a business center. So you have 5 floors of business center, some of which are full co-working spaces, i.e. open environments where you get workstations, as well as closed spaces with a room with 4 walls, all right? Now, what's amazing by this Australia House is I have had now 2 experiences where I have been able to register companies on a workstation, i.e. a desk, okay? Banks have visited it, approved it. The Ankin Group has done a fantastic job in terms of government relations in order to get companies registered on workstations. So what my 2 clients are paying is 2,500 RMB per month for a workstation to start up their business with the room for expansion to have multiple workstations or move into an actual room with 4 walls, depending on how much privacy you actually need. So that's amazing, number 1. Amazing number 2 is that Australia House is based in Chunning District. So let me go back to the map. Chunning District is point number 3 on the map. Just if you guys want to look, it's the yellow section, number 3. It's a district in central Shanghai. And this building, i.e. floors 1 to 5, have been given by the Chunning District Government and Tax Bureau preferential tax benefits if you are in a certain industry, where you get benefits on VAT, corporate income tax, and individual income tax. Okay, again, I've never seen this type of combination. I get no referral fee from them, all right, guys? I get 0 from them. I'm highlighting it because if you are trying to minimize cost and you are trying to have a tax plan created for yourself, and knowing that also Chunning District has room, you have room for growth alone in the Australia House, but also in the district itself, which is fabulous. Wow, go for this. I mean, if this would have existed back in my day, even though it says Australia House and I might be, associated more with Australians than other international countries, I don't care. I think this is a fantastic benefit to people. And I just wanted to highlight this. If you guys want to Google Australia House Shanghai, look it up. All of this, I basically took all of these details from their website. I think it's a very unique offer. The fact that you can register your company at a workstation, that the banks are okay with that, and that you have tax benefits for individual income tax, corporate tax, and even VAT. So even though you might not be profitable initially, your transactions related to VAT and the employee or employees you might have and related to individual income tax, like, wow, what a benefit. So I'm just bringing it out there because I think it's an awesome solution. You also have other areas where you might not have state, local, district incentives, but it could be because of your business. So if you fulfill the criteria of being considered a high and new technology enterprise, then you will automatically get a corporate income tax rate of 15% versus 25%. But the criteria are quite strict. So I've listed the 3 criteria here. One is related to the core IP. For me, this is a disadvantage. Basically, it means that the IP, your trademarks, need to be owned by your Chinese company, not by your overseas company. 30% of your employees need to have certain diploma or certificates of education. And the research and development expense is also reduced. So you look at these 3 criteria and see if you can fulfill it. Remember something, when you are dealing with tax bureaus, as I told you earlier, it is a competition amongst districts. They are there to earn tax revenue from you. Anytime you are looking to apply for an incentive, they are going to make your life difficult. So even though you think on a superficial level you fulfill the criteria, they are going to go into the nitty-gritty details to really make sure that you fulfill the criteria. If there is one thing that is out of line, you won't get that incentive. And you're gonna get frustrated, you're gonna get upset. I'm pre-warning you about this. All right, just be aware of it. Don't base your budgets on these incentives that you can only apply for once your company is registered, okay? The high new technology enterprises, they fall under this category of companies. So cloud computing, mobile encryption, e-commerce, modern logistics, any form of inspection services or certificate standardization services, supportive technologies for cultural creative industries. So app development, natural disaster monitoring, alert and emergency solutions. So it's really not for everybody as well. So the conclusion really is, should you wish to change office space and move to a new district in the future, understand the tax consequences. This is why I truly say that people underestimate the consideration needed by choosing the right city in China and the right district in China. All right. Again, what I'm trying everybody to avoid is paying more for changing a location versus just getting it right from the beginning and knowing where your phase plan is going to be in relation to this. All right. So one thing that I highlight is that when Woodburn, we offer our incorporation services, we offer the advisory around these 9 key considerations. I've given you the advisory around location. This is the type of advisory we give, is making sure you are pre-warned, that you know what the consequences will be from a legal and tax perspective if you get into certain areas. I have written an email this morning to a client regarding the issue around virtual office addresses. I have warned him, it's highlighted in the email. What he does with that is his prerogative. That's all I can do, is I can warn you. If you then take action and you don't take the advice, just be aware of the consequences and of what can happen. So consequences will be frozen bank accounts, will be random government inspections, could be the fact that your office gets padlocked, could be that your business is halted for 3 months if you have to move from district to district, could be that you are paying additional cost for moving city to city, operating multiple office spaces because you're setting up branch offices because you weren't clear on where you wanted to be from the beginning, etc. There was one question in the registration report from somebody who said, so my understanding from the question was that they have a rep office in China, and whether it makes sense to then expand with a multiple amount of rep offices in other cities. Look, your expansion strategies are all going to be unique. When you're expanding in China, I would not do that with the method of a rep office. You're going to be paying a lot more taxes on your expenses versus having a limited liability company and then expanding via branch offices. That model just gives you much more flexibility than a rep office model does. So I just wanted to highlight that because that was a question that popped in from the registration report. Action plan. You know, when you are incorporating your company, you have to give us the lease agreement. That's one of my criteria. I need to know where you're going to be based. So the first decision you have to make is whether you're going to be in a business center or whether you'll be in an operational office. Business centers are so easy to start up in. Again, I don't get referrals from anyone, guys. I'm just looking at it from a practical standpoint. Business centers, the assets are there. What I mean by assets is furniture, meeting rooms, kitchen. You get included in the price a receptionist. It's all set up for you. You literally just have to bring your laptop into your room, maybe purchase a couple of folders and a printer, and you're done. Okay. I think it is a fantastic way to start up in China, and it is a quick way. My recommendation with lease agreements with business centers is the following. You can start off by saying, I need 1 workstation, or I need a 6 square meter office space because I'm just going to hire 1 person. In that contract, start negotiating regarding your future vision. Meaning, you know, give an estimate. Say for 1 year, I need a workstation and a 6 square meter office space. But then in the 2nd year, I need to upgrade. What would you need to upgrade to? Is it 2, 3 workstations because you're going to add headcount? Is it that you need to move from a 6 square meter office space to a 12 square meter office space? Include that first expansion into that lease agreement and fix the price. The reason why I say that is so that when you're budgeting, you have in your budget a fixed rental amount, and there are no surprises. From personal experience, I started off in a business center. I expanded. I needed to grow headcount. And so I moved with the same provider in another location that had just opened up and was offering cheap prices. And was in there for about a year and a half, was very happy. And literally overnight, not to the fault of the business center, the landlord of the business center increased the rent by 50%, which was then passed on from the business center to the tenants. An increase overnight by 50%. I had to decide by the month's end whether I was going to stay and accept that increase or whether I was going to move out. And I, at that point, had a lot of friends that were real estate agents, and they told me, look, by tomorrow I can show you 3 or 4 spaces so you can understand what the rental prices are like, and also understand what your cost would be for renovation and just installation of the office. My strategy at that point, I had 2 weeks to make that decision, was I relocated out into my own office space. So there are going to be obstacles and trigger points like that that will force you to pivot and move your direction. But I ended up saving cost. I ended up having my own office space, which then later on brought more issues as I grew. But regardless of that, that was the decision we made at the time. But as a starting point, I always do think it's fantastic to get into business centers and to secure that pricing for a certain period of time so you don't have any surprises. Operational offices, you do have to consider renovation, right? And by renovation, I mean, you're going to get an office space of, I don't know how many square meters, can go from 20 to 50 to 100. And, you know, it's a blank canvas where you have to put in flooring, ceiling, you may want to repaint, may want to put up walls to have meeting rooms and individual office spaces. You may want a kitchen to be created, etc. So you have to think about, the decoration cost, which is obviously a one-off, but that can impact your capital, your available cash flow capital. And then obviously buy all the assets, the furniture, you might go now to a big printer, office printer, and all of these type of things. So again, these are all one-offs, but it could be a heavy one-off where you're trying to use that capital for other aspects of your business to grow it versus just for an office space, right? With COVID, I will say this, rental prices gone down. It's been much easier to negotiate rental fees. Separate from that, companies are now getting into the mindset of remote working. So that does not mean that the whole team is working from home. It means that they are downsizing office space to where a certain percentage of staff will always be full-time in the office and a certain percentage will be either off-site, i.e. at clients, or working remotely from home. So this has been a new trend since COVID that you can definitely consider, because that office space is still your operational office space. You're still going to have a certain percentage of staff that are based there. A certain percentage will be working off-site, and a certain percentage will be working remotely from home. So yeah, again, this is a new trend due to COVID. So I've just given you a bit of a list on action plan, right? There is a mantra out there, guys, about location, location, location. Right? You've determined China as a place you want to invest. China is enormous, right? So understand the market. Where would it be strategically advisable for you to be located? All right. Determine your rental budget. How much can you afford? So when you're calculating your investment into China, what can you afford as a rental price that will match the image you want to create, if any, that will determine being in a convenient location, with public transportation all around, etc. So determine that type of rental budget. Obviously, again, talk to real estate agents to know what starting prices are at, but determine how much you can afford. Your location affects how you operate. It affects your sales. It affects your talent acquisition. It affects your talent retention. Okay. Don't underestimate that. All right. It does affect your operational business. Nowadays, again, it's not highlighted on that map, but when I first arrived in China, end of 2003, early 2004, there was one trading zone in Shanghai called Waigaoqiao Free Trade Zone. Sorry, there was only one free trade zone, which was Waigaoqiao Free Trade Zone. It was so far, so far. And back in those days, it was possible to have virtual offices. And then eventually in 2005, I believe the government revoked that law. And yeah, nobody could hire. Nobody wanted to work out there. There was no direct metro. You had to take the metro to the last stop. And then usually it was like a 30 to 45-minute bus drive to go out there. Or you took a taxi, and that would have been at least 200 RMB per trip, which is a lot of money for Shanghai, right? So, you know, location really does affect how you're going to get talent and whether your talent is going to be happy working there. As I've highlighted in today's presentation, listen to me about the legal and tax considerations. It is not fun when your bank account freezes. It is not fun when you have to go through the legal legal loopholes in relation to changing your office address and moving from one city to another or moving from district to district, right? Don't rush to make your decision. If you need to rush, then my recommendation would be go to a business center and go to a location that is popular, because from there you can potentially expand easier within that district versus going into a place like Fengxian and knowing you're never going to be there. Okay, meet with real estate agents. Definitely talk to them about what the best locations are, and meet with corporate service providers and other legal professions. I'm just going to highlight another case study before I finish off today, because this is also just recent. In Shenzhen, there is a zone called Chingpu Zone, and the government regulation in Chingpu Zone is that if you locate your business there, you will automatically get a 15% corporate income tax rate. For how long that's going to last, I don't know, but currently it's open-ended. Now in Shenzhen, nobody wants to be based in Chingpu, especially not if you are a media company or a service-oriented company. But you're attracted by that incentive of 15% profits tax, right? So a lot of people, banks, lawyers are telling people, go set up in a virtual office concept, which is being illegally provided by the zone. Can I also highlight that? Illegally provided by the zone. You have your office there, registered there. You can take the 15% incentive rate, and then you locate down in Futian or, you know, in a more CBD area, right? I mean, you can do all of that, okay? I'm not happy to hear that banks and lawyers are recommending that, because you don't know when the government in Chingpu is going to say, hey guys, no more virtual offices. Now you have to rent a real space. And then what happens if they are determining rental prices and they are saying, you know what, now let's take advantage. Let's increase the rental prices. This can all happen in China, okay? These are risks that you are taking by taking advantage of a tax incentive rate, and you're not even planning on being profitable within the next 5 to 10 years. Why are you doing that, right? Don't forget, you can also change location at the point that you're profitable, guys, in order to take benefit of tax incentive rates. So think very wisely about having these virtual offices and not having your people located in that office. Like I said, the worst thing I've seen is a company having their bank accounts frozen for 3 months, having a turnover of employees. Like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to your team, to your staff, by not following the simplest regulations. And yes, I'm very harsh on this, because in the end, I was the one talking to those employees on behalf of my client, trying to calm them down, trying to say, don't worry, we're in the midst of unfreezing it. Yes, you know, I couldn't say your boss was an idiot, but that's what I was thinking, all right? And again, I am harsh because I don't want to be the one talking to the employees about this. This is, again, the foundation of your organization in China. The foundation has to be correct, in order to move forward. All right. And that's why I'm giving these webinars and presentations to educate you guys on this. You need to be pre-warned about these legal and tax consequences. You need to go to a real estate agent and do a location analysis to know where is the right place to be. Is the right place to be near suppliers? Is the right place near customers? Is the right place to be near third-party providers? I can't answer that for you. Okay, that's part of your research to know where is the right place to be. All right, and just make sure you make the right decision on that. Why did we choose Shanghai? There was no location analysis back then, to be quite honest with you, but it was a very simple analysis. We are a corporate service provider. Shanghai is considered the middle of the eastern seaboard of China. It is 2 hours to fly to Beijing, 2 hours to fly to Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hong Kong. You can go 2 hours that way. There's a multitude of train lines and flights. It is the central of eastern board. If we plan on expanding, it's easy to get from Shanghai elsewhere. That was our decision-making process. Nothing complicated, but we're service-oriented. It's very different, all right? But the transportation and the link to the other cities was crucial for us. So we knew that Beijing to Hong Kong was going to be at least a 3.5, 4 hour flight. And if there was an emergency where my brother or father had to pick up and come, it was going to take a little bit longer. So that was the consideration we made. All right, so think about those things carefully, right? I would love to know what was your biggest takeaway from today. And if you would like to give me what was your biggest takeaway from the whole webinar series, please do let me know. Again, this is something that always helps in regards to future webinars that we are performing. And then we can get to the Q&A. So hold on, I'm just reading through. So Julie said, can I please ask a question relating more to the workshop on Monday? Sure, Julia, ask away. You can unmute yourself if that makes it easier. I haven't muted everybody.
Thank you, Christina. I just wanted to ask a question about, the shareholders you explained. By the way, thank you for your presentation. It's really helpful because it's very detailed. Even if I have been operating in China for many, many years, but we don't necessarily know those, details relating to taxation and, legal consequences.
Sure.
That was really helpful. I just have a question about limited companies shareholders. You mentioned about board of directors of board, and legal representative, general manager, company secretary.
No, in China, there's no company secretary. There's a supervisor.
All right. So can one of the board of directors be the general manager or the legal representative, or do they have to be different person?
No. So if you have a board of directors, normally the chairman of the board will be the legal representative.
Okay.
And if you want to downsize the structure, can also be the general manager. You don't have to have everybody as separate people.
Yeah, that was one of our concern, because part of us wanted to keep our optimal control over how the business run from UK.
So my suggestion is, if you really want to have optimal control and efficiency, avoid the board of directors if possible. I don't know what your ultimate structure looks like, and Julia, I don't want you to highlight that here today because this is a public conversation. But yeah, thank you. Cutting down from a board of directors, where you need a minimum of 3 people, and then you need 3 decision makers, down to an executive director who is in control over all the decisions and implementations, obviously discussed with the shareholder, makes it much easier to move forward. So you have the executive director, the legal rep, and the GM, and those 3 roles can be with 1 person.
Okay.
Now, whether that 1 person wants to take on all those 3 roles is up to, they might have a certain level of fear around that. I've been at this so long, I don't have fear anymore, because my feeling is, if you have the right corporate governance and the right back-end administration functions in place, then, you know, there's nothing to worry about.
Right. Thank you.
If you don't implement that, then obviously I would have a certain level of fear because I don't have transparency over what's going on in China.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. All right. There's just people giving me some takeaways. So Leanne's biggest takeaway was planning and making decisions concerning location, structure, people, banks, and many others is really important even before engaging professional advisors. I mean, Leanne, I'm just going to say something there. You know, I've revealed what those key considerations are. So now you have a baseline. Don't let those decisions stop you from moving forward, though, to talk to professional advisors. Because I see that in many instances, companies try to make those decisions internally, and then there are roadblocks because there's no agreement. Try to get an external party to come into those discussions to help break the ice and just clear that process. Even if you don't know, you know, for corporate, I'm going to use Julia's example for the corporate management, you don't know who's going to be in the roles. Talk to someone who can explain what the responsibilities are. What is your liability as an individual before, because that will just help ease the process of making that decision internally, right? So don't wait until you talk to someone, have someone come in actually sooner to give you explanations so that you can go then further in-house to discuss.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess maybe not so much making final decisions, but the considerations, like, you know, I didn't even know some of these considerations. So you've given a nice blueprint. And then when we do, at least we know what like the agenda is, so to speak, and
yes.
the menu items of like things we need to cover.
Correct.
So
I mean, that was
so
the whole
much.
point. I mean, that was the whole point, is to give you guys an agenda of what to sit around a boardroom table and actually have a negotiation about what you have to do and whatnot. But I've seen too many times, especially with corporate management, that people get into a roadblock in terms of moving forward because they're discussing too much who's going to take those roles. And everyone's like, oh, you know, I don't want to be legal rep. I don't want to be, you know, the other person says, I don't want to be legal rep, but you don't even know what it means to be a legal rep. You're just worried by having some form of a title in China. So definitely don't hesitate to talk to someone at that phase.
Yeah, thank you very much for this week. It's been really good, really informative, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. I will, by the way, add my contact details into the chat box. Hari's takeaway. So Hari is a good friend, and he's a fan of the webinars, and I love that he comes on. But I like his takeaway a lot, which re-emphasizes what I want people to hear, which is understand the budgets and costs. Not just about location, Hari, about everything. Understand what your budgets and costs are. And then have discussions with third parties around it. Definitely get advice around that. So guys, that's all that's popped in. I'm just thinking from the top of my head if there was any good questions from the registration report, because there were a couple, but I think I addressed them in the presentation directly. If I didn't answer your question and you want me to answer it, just type it in quickly. Otherwise, I'm gonna copy and paste my contact details, which are on the next slide. If you guys want to work with me, so I don't know, I hate always trying to sell myself, but I will try and sell myself since it's the last day. So just so you guys know in terms of what Woodburn does, what we do is we help with the incorporation advisory. We help with the actual implementation of the incorporation of the entity, and the types of entities you want to set up. We do competitor business scope benchmarking, which I think is a great tool to do as well. I can act as a supervisor on my clients' companies. Sally, who is our head of client services, she can act as the finance manager when setting up the companies. And then obviously we do all of the administrative function. And again, my biggest ethical, and sometimes it brings me into a dilemma, is I will be brash with people. I don't want people to make mistakes. I've done it myself. I've gone through that hardship. I've paid a price on it, both from price-wise as well as emotionally. And I just don't want people to go through that. There's no need to, right? So China can be fun. It can be easy as long as you have that right ecosystem. And, you know, I've brought in 3 different speakers on here today. I'm not the only one out there, guys. There's plenty of support systems out there where you can get advice and talk to people. If I can give you one advice in regards to advisors and to lawyers or corporate service providers, that's been a bit my experience. And I don't want to talk badly about anyone. But first of all, if you're working with a lawyer, please work with law firms that are specialized in foreign investors, because the way a lawyer will approach a foreign investor versus domestic company, sometimes it's the same. And what domestic companies do, I don't want you to do. Okay, so be wary of that when you're talking to lawyers. When you are talking to incorporation agents or just generally other corporate service providers, please do look at the actual advisor and the level of experience that advisor has. I've gone through that myself, where I've hired lawyers in-house that were new graduates, had 2 years of working experience. I had to do so much training with them. But what I want to highlight here is, you know, you don't want to work with an advisor that has 2 years of experience, because they haven't experienced anything in China. Like, quite frankly, I hadn't back in the day. I'm saying this from 17 years of experience. Manfred, who came on yesterday, has 15 years. The law firm on Tuesday, Wang Jing, Franco, who didn't speak, he's got now, I think more than me, almost 20 years of on the ground experience. Valentino has 10. Diana, I think, has 6 or 7. But talking with people who have that extensive on the ground experience is invaluable. And that's who I want you guys to be working with, versus people who've just been there for 2 years and say they know everything. They really don't. Still learning after 17 years. All right. So that's my 2 cents in terms of when you're working with lawyers or incorporation agents, or just, you know, local folks or whomever, that they are advising you in the correct way as being a foreign investor. Okay. So definitely keep that in the back of your mind. Again, if you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm just going to copy. I'm going to stop the share so I can copy those details in the chat box. Oops, 1 second. I have to exit the screen. Here we go. 1 moment. I'm learning everything on chat. Okay, here we go. How do I write in the chat box? Here. So you guys have all my details. So for those of you that are still on, you've got my details. Let me share again so I can just finish up. In case you guys are wondering, we still have webinar series that are popping up for the rest of April. So on April 6th, we've got the China roadmap, which is basically a roadmap I have created, which crosses off the T's, dots the I's in relation to a checklist of what I want you all to think about when establishing in China. So we look at the 9 superpowers and what is entailed in those 9 superpowers about action plans that you should be doing. And then at the end of the month, all of you that are on here are thinking about establishing a company in China. So this is the next step, is that once you've got that company on the ground, how to analyze it. So we're going to look at how to review your China business performance. For those that are already established in China, Valentino and Diana are coming back on to talk about what you need to do with the foreign investment law. I'm going to be talking about how to analyze your financial management reports. Manfred, who spoke yesterday, is going to be talking about the opposing objectives between head office and subsidiary. And we've got even a GM who's coming on to give what his current experience is on that. He is an Austrian, works for a German company, and what his dilemma is as a foreign on the ground, being that bridge with the head office, and how that can be a roadblock in itself in terms of your business growth. And then on the last day, I'll be talking about 10 reasons why some businesses are not successful in the Chinese market. And it stems predominantly from leadership. So these webinars are all up and running on our website at woodburnglobal.com/events. There will be marketing that comes out in the next few weeks associated with them. But as you are all looking to establish a company, I would recommend you to join those sessions, because that will be the next step, right? Is how to analyze your business on a month, day to day, week to week, month to month basis. All right. I want to thank you all for joining me. It's been a great 5 days. I'm exhausted. I'm happy it's Friday. And if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. As I mentioned, all my details are in the chat box. So happy to have a conversation. No strings attached. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.